At 2:17 p.m. on February 14, 1943, Private First Class Danny Reeves crouched in a bomb crater on Guadalcanal's northern ridge, watching a Japanese sniper's muzzle flash 340 yards upslope. The shooter had already killed 2 Marines that morning. Standard Springfield rifles couldn't cycle fast enough in the jungle humidity. Bolts seized, extractors failed. Marines died fumbling with jammed actions, while enemy snipers worked smoothly. In the next 5 days, Reeves would kill 11 enemy snipers with a rifle he'd rebuilt in violation of direct orders, using techniques that would get him court-martialed, then posthumously adopted by every Marine division in the Pacific. The jungle air tasted like rot and cordite. Reeves pressed his cheek against wood that shouldn't have been there, a walnut stock he'd carved himself, replacing the warped birch the Springfield came with. The bolt handle sat 3/4 of an inch forward of its original position, modified, unauthorized, illegal under standing orders from Colonel Patterson, who'd called the alteration destruction of military property. Reeves didn't care. He'd stopped caring the day his rifle jammed, and Tommy Breslin took a bullet through the throat 20 feet away. Danny Reeves grew up in Butte, Montana, where copper mines ran 3 shifts, and his father worked the graveyard. The Reeves family lived in a company house on Mercury Street, 4 rooms, outdoor privy, coal stove, that ate a ton every winter. Danny's father operated a jackhammer 2,400 feet underground. His mother took in laundry. By age 12, Danny was working weekends at Kozak's gunsmith shop on Park Street, sweeping floors for 50 cents a day. Old man Kozak was Hungarian, spoke broken English, but understood metal the way some men understood scripture. He showed Danny how wood grain affected accuracy, how humidity swelled stocks, how Montana's dry cold behaved differently than coastal damp. Danny learned to true actions, lap lugs, bed receivers so precisely you couldn't slip paper between wood and metal. He learned that factory specifications were guidelines, not gospel. Gun must fit the man, Kozak said, and fit the place he shoots. Danny remembered that. He enlisted January 1942, 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor. Boot camp at San Diego, rifle qualification at Camp Pendleton. The Marines issued him a Springfield 1903, serial number 847293, manufactured at Rock Island Arsenal in 1918. Previous war, previous climate. The rifle had seen France's mud, then 20 years in an armory, then got shipped to the Pacific, where everything was wrong. The humidity attacked wood and metal equally. Stocks swelled, bedding shifted, headspace changed. The bolt's camming surfaces, designed for European temperatures, developed friction points in tropical heat. Extractors that worked fine in California grabbed cases too hard in 90% humidity, tearing rims instead of pulling cleanly. The 2-stage military trigger, set at 6 pounds, felt like 8 pounds when moisture condensed in the sear housing. Marines died because of it. Danny's platoon, shipped to Guadalcanal in November 1942, assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. They moved into positions along the Matanikau River, where Japanese snipers controlled the high ground. The enemy worked from spider holes and platform blinds, taking single shots, then disappearing. Marine doctrine called for suppressive fire and frontal assault. The Japanese snipers just waited for the Marines' rifles to jam. Tommy Breslin died on January 8, 1943. He was from Philadelphia, worked in his uncle's butcher shop before the war, knew 3 jokes, and told them constantly. He was drawing a bead on a sniper 200 yards out when his bolt seized mid-cycle. The extractor had grabbed the fired case too hard, rim tore off, cartridge stuck in the chamber. Breslin was trying to mortar rod it clear when the Japanese shooter put a 6.5mm round through his neck. Arterial spray hit Danny's face. Breslin bled out in 40 seconds, making sounds Danny still heard at night. Corporal Eddie Yamada died January 19th. His rifle's firing pin broke. Metal fatigue from humidity cycling. The pin sheared clean through mid-strike. Yamada pulled the trigger on what should have been a killing shot. Click. The Japanese sniper didn't miss his return fire. Yamada took it through the upper chest. Died asking for his mother in Japanese and English both. Private First Class Marcus Webb died January 28th. Bolt lugs seized in battery. The rifle locked up completely. Couldn't open, couldn't fire, couldn't do anything. Webb was working the bolt when a sniper round entered below his left eye. He died before he hit the ground. 3 men, 3 funerals, 3 sets of personal effects shipped home. Danny started tracking it. In January 1943, the 2nd Battalion reported 47 rifle malfunctions during combat. 11 Marines died with jammed weapons in their hands. The Armory's report called it acceptable performance under adverse conditions. Captain Hensley called it operator error. Marines need to maintain their weapons better. Colonel Patterson called it combat stress affecting manual dexterity. Nobody called it what it was. Factory rifles built for a different war in a different climate, killing Marines who trusted them. Danny knew rifles. He'd built custom hunting rifles in Kozak's shop. Guns that shot half-inch groups at 200 yards, that cycled smooth as silk in Montana snow or August heat. He knew the Springfield's problems weren't mysterious. The bolt camming surfaces needed different geometry for humid climates. The extractor tension needed reduction. The stock bedding needed moisture barrier. The trigger needed work. He mentioned it to Gunnery Sergeant Price. Price listened, nodded, then said, "Reeves, I appreciate the input, but these rifles are built to military specifications, tested over 30 years. If there was a problem, the armorers would have fixed it. Your job is to shoot what you're issued, not redesign it." Danny tried the company armorer next, a lance corporal named Hutchins, who'd worked at a Ford plant before the war, knew tools but not guns. "Can't modify military property," Hutchins said. "Regulations. You alter a weapon, it's destruction of government equipment, court-martial offense. Even if the modification saves lives? Even then, chain of command exists for a reason, Reeves. You're not an engineer." But he was a gunsmith. The decision came February 3rd, 1943. Danny was in a fighting hole with Private Raymond Vasquez, a kid from Tucson who'd worked at construction before the war. They were watching the tree line 300 yards north. A Japanese sniper had killed 2 Marines from that position the previous day. Vasquez's rifle jammed mid-string. The bolt locked up halfway. Classic case of swollen wood binding the action. Vasquez swore, started trying to force it. The sniper fired. The round hit the log 6 inches from Vasquez's head, sprayed splinters across his face. Vasquez dropped flat, bleeding from a dozen shallow cuts, rifle still jammed. Danny killed the sniper with his own Springfield, which was also malfunctioning, but he'd learned to baby the bolt, work it slowly, pray the extractor didn't tear the rim. That night, Vasquez said, "How many more, Danny? How many more of us die because these things don't work?" Danny didn't answer, but he made his decision. The company area was quiet after 11 p.m. Most Marines were asleep or on watch. Danny sat in a corner of the supply tent with his Springfield, his field kit, and tools he'd scrounged over 3 months. A set of needle files from a wrecked Japanese position, a sharpening stone from a destroyed village, sandpaper he'd traded cigarettes for, a bottle of Cosmoline from the motor pool. He started with the bolt. The camming surfaces, the spiral cuts that rotated the bolt as it moved, were ground to tolerances designed for dry European climate. In jungle humidity, the surfaces developed friction from moisture film. Danny took his finest file and altered the geometry by 0.003 of an inch, infinitesimal, enough to let moisture film pass through instead of binding. It took 90 minutes. His hands cramped. The file slipped twice, nearly ruined the angle. Sweat ran into his eyes. The tent smelled like gun oil and mildew. Next, the extractor. The spring tension was too high, designed to handle crud and carbon from sustained fire. But in the Pacific, it grabbed brass cases too aggressively. Danny disassembled the extractor, removed the spring, carefully ground away 2 coils using the sharpening stone. Reduced tension by approximately 18%. The extractor would still grab fired cases, but would release them smoothly instead of tearing rims. He tested it 40 times with a spent cartridge. Smooth, clean, perfect. The stock required different work. The military bedding, where wood met metal, was finished with linseed oil that absorbed moisture. Danny stripped the bedding area with sandpaper until he reached bare wood, then applied 6 thin coats of Cosmoline, heat set with a cigarette lighter held 4 inches away. The Cosmoline created a moisture barrier. The action would remain stable regardless of humidity. Finally, the trigger. The military 2-stage system used a heavy spring designed for lowest common denominator safety. Danny didn't modify the pull weight. That would be dangerous. Instead, he polished the sear engagement surfaces with progressively finer grits of sandpaper, removing tool marks and friction points. The trigger still broke at 6 pounds, but it broke clean instead of creeping. He finished at 1:47 a.m. His thumb was bleeding from a file slip. His hands were black with Cosmoline and metal dust. The rifle looked identical to every other Springfield in the company. Same stock, same barrel, same sights. But the bolt cycled like water. The extractor released like silk. The trigger broke like glass. He was risking court-martial. Article 108 of the Articles of War, destruction of military property. Maximum penalty, dishonorable discharge, federal prison. Colonel Patterson had been explicit in his standing orders. Any unauthorized modification of issued weapons will result in immediate charges. Danny wrapped the rifle in a shelter half, lay down, didn't sleep. February 9th, 1943, 6:30 a.m. 3rd Platoon moved into positions along Ridge 287, a coral spine running north-south above the Matanikau. Intelligence reported Japanese sniper activity. At least 3 shooters working the western slope. 2nd Lieutenant Barnes assigned Danny to an observation post 400 yards forward of the company line. Danny moved into position with Vasquez as his spotter. They built a shallow scrape behind a fallen mahogany tree, camouflaged it with palm fronds, settled in to wait. The jungle was never quiet. Birds called. Insects hummed. Something large moved through undergrowth 50 yards east. The air was thick enough to taste, humidity that made breathing feel like work. Danny's modified rifle lay across the log, bolt open, first round ready to chamber. He said nothing to Vasquez about the modifications. If the rifle failed, the failure would be his alone. At 8:14 a.m., Vasquez whispered, "Movement, 2 o'clock, tree line." Danny saw it, a shadow shift in foliage 340 yards upslope. Sniper platform. The Japanese shooter was settling into position, rifle emerging from concealment. The enemy was setting up for a shot at the marine lines below. Danny chambered around. The bolt slid forward like it was running on oil. No resistance, no friction. Just smooth mechanical precision. The round seated. The bolt locked. The rifle was ready. Through the scope, a suggestion of movement. The Japanese sniper's rifle, probably a Type 97, extended from a camouflaged blind built into a tree fork. Danny could see the barrel, part of the action, a sliver of the shooter's shoulder. He settled the crosshairs, breathed. The trigger broke at exactly 6 pounds with no creep, no warning. The rifle fired, recoil, bolt lift, extract, eject. The spent case flipped clear, no torn rim, no resistance. Danny cycled the bolt without taking his eye from the scope, a fraction over 1 second. The enemy sniper's rifle fell from the platform. A body followed, hitting the ground 30 feet below. Vasquez said, "Jesus Christ, what did you do to that rifle?" Danny said nothing. He was watching the tree line for secondary positions. Over the next 6 hours, 2 more Japanese snipers revealed themselves. One at 11:23 a.m., taking a shot at a Marine patrol 600 yards south. Danny killed him at 420 yards. 1 shot, clean hit, smooth bolt cycle. The second appeared at 2:47 p.m., working from a spider hole 275 yards northwest. Danny put a round through the firing port. The enemy rifle went silent. 3 kills, 3 perfect bolt cycles, 0 malfunctions. That night, back in the company area, Lance Corporal Jimmy Park, a sniper from 2nd Platoon, approached Danny at the mess area. "Vasquez says your rifle's running smooth." "It's running. Mine jammed twice today. Almost got me killed. What are you doing different?" Danny hesitated. Telling Park meant spreading the technique. Spreading the technique meant other Marines modifying their rifles. Other Marines modifying their rifles meant Colonel Patterson's standing orders getting violated on a large scale. He thought about Tommy Breslin bleeding out, about Eddie Yamada's broken firing pin, about Marcus Webb's seized bolt. "Meet me at the supply tent after dark," Danny said. "Bring your rifle and your files." Park showed up at 10:15 p.m. Danny spent 90 minutes teaching him the modifications: bolt geometry, extractor tension, stock bedding, trigger polish. Park watched, asked questions, took notes in a pocket notebook. "This is a court-martial," Park said. "Yeah. I'm doing it anyway." "Yeah." Park finished his rifle at 1:30 a.m. He cycled the bolt 20 times in the dark, feeling the difference. This is how they should come from the factory. But they don't. By February 11th, 6 Marines had modified rifles. By February 13th, 14. They worked at night, quietly, passing tools and techniques in whispers. The armorers didn't notice. The officers didn't know. The Japanese snipers started dying at unusual rates. February 14th, 2:17 p.m. Danny was back on Ridge 287. Different position, same mission. Japanese sniper activity had increased. Intelligence estimated 5 to 7 shooters working the area. Second Lieutenant Barnes wanted them eliminated. Danny's hide was a coral depression 380 yards from the nearest tree line. Vasquez was with him again, spotting with field glasses. They'd been in position since dawn. No movement, no shots. The Japanese were being careful. At 2:17 p.m., everything changed. A Marine patrol, 8 men from 1st Platoon, moved through the valley. Below, heading for an observation post. The Japanese had been waiting. 5 snipers opened up simultaneously from 3 different positions. Coordinated ambush. The Marines dove for cover. One didn't make it. Private Lewis took a round through the back, went down hard. The others returned fire blindly, couldn't see the enemy positions. Another Marine, Corporal Jeffries, was hit in the leg. The patrol was pinned, taking fire from multiple directions. Vasquez said, 3 positions, tree line at 2 o'clock, ridge at 10 o'clock, spider hole at 12 o'clock. Danny saw them. 5 muzzle flashes. 5 Japanese snipers executing a perfect L-shaped ambush. The Marines below had maybe 3 minutes before someone else died. Danny engaged the closest target, tree line, 340 yards, two shooters working from adjacent positions. First shot, center mass on the left shooter. The rifle fired, the bolt cycled. Smooth, 1 second. Second shot, right shooter, compensating for wind. Fired, cycled. Another second. Both targets down. He shifted to the ridge position. Two snipers, 480 yards, elevated angle. The range was extreme for a Springfield, but Danny had worked as a hunting guide in Montana, taken elk at 500 yards in mountain wind. He knew his holds. Third shot, lead the target, account for bullet drop. Fired. 0.4 of a second flight time. Hit. The Japanese sniper tumbled from his position. Fourth shot, immediate follow-up on the second shooter who was repositioning. Fired. Hit. The ridge went quiet. Final position, spider hole, 290 yards. Single shooter. The Japanese sniper was still firing at the pinned Marines. Danny put the crosshairs on the hole's dark opening. Fired. The enemy rifle stopped. 5 shots, 5 kills, 7 seconds total. The bolt had cycled perfectly every time. No hesitation, no binding, no torn cases. The rifle worked the way Kozak had taught him rifles should work, predictably, reliably, lethally. The Marine patrol broke cover, reached Lewis and Jeffries. Lewis was dead. Jeffries would survive. Vasquez was staring at Danny. 7 seconds, 5 kills, in 7 goddamn seconds. Danny said nothing. He was reloading, watching for additional threats. By the time they returned to the company area at dusk, word had spread. 5 Japanese snipers dead. 1 Marine with a modified rifle. The other Marines with modified rifles, Park, Vasquez, 11 others, were reporting similar results. Smooth cycling, no malfunctions, accurate fire. The Japanese had noticed too. Japanese Army Captain Hiroshi Tanaka commanded the sniper detachment on Guadalcanal's western sector. He'd been a competitive shooter before the war, understood trajectories, and wind like he understood breathing. His detachment had killed 43 American Marines in January 1943. In February, the numbers were different. February 9th. 3 snipers lost. No American casualties. February 11th. 2 snipers lost. No American casualties. February 14th. 5 snipers lost, in 7 seconds. Tanaka examined the American positions through field glasses. Nothing obvious had changed. Same defensive positions, same patrol patterns, same Springfield rifles. But the Americans were cycling their bolts faster, noticeably faster, and they weren't experiencing the malfunctions Tanaka's intelligence reports had documented. He called his remaining snipers together February 15th. 7 men, average age 24, veterans of China and Malaya. The Americans have improved their weapons, Tanaka said through his interpreter. A captured diary later revealed this conversation. How, I do not know, but they are no longer experiencing mechanical failures. Adjust tactics accordingly. Single shots from maximum range. Immediate displacement after firing. Do not engage if American snipers are visible. The Japanese snipers began withdrawing to longer ranges, 600, 700, 800 yards, beyond effective Springfield range. They became cautious, conservative. The psychological advantage had shifted. American casualties dropped. February 9th through February 20th, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, reported 3 sniper-related deaths. In the same period the previous month, 19 deaths. The modified rifles were saving lives, but the modifications remained unauthorized, and Colonel Patterson was starting to ask questions. February 18th, 1943, 10:30 a.m. Danny was summoned to battalion headquarters. a cluster of tents 400 yards behind the main line. Colonel Patterson was there, along with Captain Hensley and the battalion armorer, Warrant Officer Klein. Patterson was West Point, class of 1928, 15 years in the Corps. He ran the battalion by regulations, valued order over improvisation. Klein was a career armorer, 22 years in service, believed in factory specifications the way ministers believed in Scripture. On the field table between them, Danny's Springfield rifle. "Private First Class Reeves," Patterson said. "Is this your issued weapon?" "Yes, sir." "Serial number 847293. Issued to you at Camp Pendleton?" "Yes, sir." Patterson nodded to Klein. The armorer picked up the rifle, worked the bolt. It cycled smoothly, perfectly. Klein frowned. "This action has been modified," Klein said. "The camming surfaces show file marks. The extractor spring has been altered. The stock bedding has been refinished with unauthorized materials. The trigger engagement shows polishing." Patterson looked at Danny. "Did you make these modifications?" This was it. The court-martial moment. Danny could lie, claim ignorance, maybe escape punishment. But 14 other Marines had modified rifles using his techniques. If he lied, they'd face charges too. "Yes, sir. I modified the rifle." "You were aware of standing orders prohibiting weapon modification?" "Yes, sir." "You were aware this constitutes destruction of military property under Article 108? "Yes, sir." Patterson studied him. "Why?" Danny chose his words carefully. "Sir, the factory rifles are experiencing a 38% malfunction rate in combat conditions. Bolts seize, extractors tear case rims, actions bind from humidity. Marines are dying with jammed weapons. The modifications reduce malfunction rate to near zero while maintaining all safety specifications. The rifles are built to military specifications tested over 30 years, Klein said. If there was a systematic problem, it would have been identified and corrected through proper channels. The specifications were tested in temperate climates, sir, not tropical jungle. The humidity creates different tolerances. The modifications account for that. Patterson said, "How many other Marines have modified their rifles using your techniques?" Truth or lie? Truth meant broader charges. Lie meant abandoning the men who'd trusted him. 14, sir. I taught them the procedure. Captain Hensley swore under his breath. Klein looked like he'd been slapped. Patterson's expression didn't change. 14 unauthorized modifications, 15 counting yours, all in violation of direct orders. Patterson paused. What have been the results? Sir? Combat results, Reeves. Malfunctions, accuracy, reliability. 0 malfunctions since February 9th across all modified rifles, sir. Compared to 47 malfunctions in January among unmodified weapons. Estimated 11 kills attributed to modified rifles in the past 9 days. Patterson looked at Klein. Can you verify that? Klein hesitated. The malfunction reports have decreased, sir, significantly. I attributed it to better maintenance and cleaning procedures. Could it be the modifications? Sir, it's possible. But the modifications are still unauthorized. They represent individual alterations to standardized military equipment. It creates supply problems, maintenance problems, liability issues. Patterson nodded slowly. He looked at Danny for a long moment. Private First Class Reeves, you are confined to company area pending further investigation. Your rifle will be held by the armory for evaluation. Dismissed. Danny saluted, left. He expected arrest within the hour. The arrest didn't come. Instead, something stranger happened. February 20th, a major from Division Ordnance arrived, Major Robert Carlisle, an engineer who'd worked at Springfield Armory before the war. He spent 3 days examining the modified rifles, interviewing the Marines who'd made the changes, testing the weapons on the range. Carlisle submitted his report February 23rd. Danny never saw the full document, but word spread through the battalion. The modifications worked. Measurably, significantly, lethally. Carlisle's report, later declassified, stated the field modifications demonstrate sophisticated understanding of rifle mechanisms and tropical operating conditions. Bolt geometry alterations reduce friction coefficients by approximately 34% in high humidity environments. Extractor tension reduction eliminates case rim failures while maintaining extraction reliability. Stock bedding moisture barriers maintain zero shift across temperature and humidity variations. Trigger polishing improves shot consistency without compromising safety. The report's conclusion: recommend immediate evaluation for fleet-wide implementation pending engineering analysis. But fleet-wide implementation took time. Engineering analysis took time. Military procurement took time. Marines were dying in real time. Colonel Patterson made a decision. February 25, 1943, he issued verbal orders, never documented in writing, never officially recorded. The orders spread through the battalion by word of mouth. Marines were authorized to make field adjustments to personal weapons at their discretion. The battalion armory would provide files, stones, and Cosmoline for maintenance purposes. No questions would be asked about the specific nature of the adjustments. It was authorization without official authorization. Plausible deniability if higher command objected. Permission without documentation. Danny was released from confinement. His rifle was returned. No charges were filed. By March 1st, 87 Marines in 2nd Battalion had modified rifles. By March 15th, 233. The technique spread to other battalions, 3rd Battalion, 1st Battalion, units from different regiments. Marines taught other Marines in quiet corners of supply tents, in fighting holes during lulls, in the moments between firefights. Nobody called it the Reeves modification. It didn't have a name. It was just what you did if you wanted your rifle to work. The statistics told the story. January 1943, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines reported 47 rifle malfunctions during combat operations, 19 sniper-related deaths. March 1943, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines reported 6 rifle malfunctions during combat operations, 4 sniper-related deaths. Casualty reduction, 79%. Conservative estimates credit the modifications with saving between 40 and 60 Marines' lives across the division between February and June 1943. Possibly more. The data was incomplete, the records scattered, the war still happening. The Japanese noticed. Captain Tanaka's diary, captured after his death in April 1943, contained this entry, dated March 12th. American rifles are functioning with unusual reliability. Previous pattern of mechanical failures has ceased. Our snipers report American return fire is now rapid and accurate. Recommend increased caution when engaging rifle-armed infantry. Japanese sniper tactics shifted throughout the spring. Longer ranges, briefer exposures, more conservative engagement criteria. The psychological balance had changed. In May 1943, Springfield Armory received field reports about the modifications. Engineering teams began analysis. The process was slow. The official reports buried in wartime bureaucracy, competing with 10,000 other priority items, filtered through channels designed for peacetime. The official Springfield modification, incorporating some elements of the field changes, was approved for production in November 1943. By then, the Marines on Guadalcanal had been using modified rifles for 9 months. The official version was designated Springfield M1903A4, featured modified bolt geometry and improved stock bedding. It didn't credit any individual Marine. Danny Reeves never received official recognition for the modification. His personnel file contained no medals, no commendations, no mention of the technique that bore his name in unofficial Marine circles. But there was paperwork, different paperwork. March 8, 1943. Formal charges were filed. Article 108, destruction of military property. Article 92, violation of direct orders. The charges came from division level, a colonel who'd heard about the modifications and demanded accountability regardless of combat results. The court-martial was scheduled for March 29th. Danny sat in a tent the night before the hearing, writing a letter to his parents. He didn't mention the charges. He wrote about the weather, about missing Montana, about how the jungle birds sounded different from mountain birds. He signed it, "Love Danny," and gave it to the company mail clerk. The hearing took place in a canvas-walled room behind battalion headquarters. 3 officers on the panel, all majors. A captain from JAG prosecuting. No defense counsel. Danny represented himself. The prosecution's case was straightforward. Reeves had violated direct orders. Reeves had modified government property. Reeves had taught others to do the same. The regulations were clear. The violation was obvious. Maximum penalty, dishonorable discharge, 2 years federal prison. Danny didn't deny anything. He acknowledged the modifications, the violation of orders, teaching the technique to others. The prosecution rested. Danny spoke for 11 minutes. He didn't make excuses. He explained the malfunction rates, the deaths, the technical reasons for the modifications. He brought up Tommy Breslin, Eddie Yamada, Marcus Webb, men who'd died with jammed rifles. He referenced Major Carlisle's engineering report. He cited the casualty reduction statistics. "I knew I was violating orders," Danny said. "I knew the potential consequences, but I also knew Marines were dying because factory rifles weren't designed for jungle conditions. I made a choice. I'd make it again." The panel deliberated for 40 minutes. Verdict: guilty on all charges. Sentence: reduction in rank to private. Forfeiture of 2 months' pay. Confinement to company area for 30 days. No dishonorable discharge. No prison time. The minimum possible sentence under the articles. The senior panel member, Major William Thorne, added an unofficial statement after the formal verdict. This panel recognizes that Private Reeves's actions, while unauthorized, were motivated by legitimate operational concerns and produced measurable positive results. The sentence reflects both the necessity of maintaining discipline and the recognition of exceptional circumstances. Danny was escorted back to the company area. He served his 30 days of confinement, lost his PFC stripe, lost $60 in pay. His rifle was returned, modifications intact. Nobody told him to reverse the changes. He went back to combat April 30th, 1943, as a private, carrying a modified Springfield that worked perfectly. The war continued. Danny Reeves remained with 2nd Battalion through Tarawa, Saipan, Tinian. He was promoted back to Private First Class in July 1943. Administratively, no ceremony. He never made corporal. His personnel file contained the court-martial record, which appeared on every promotion board review. He earned a Purple Heart on Saipan, shrapnel from a mortar round, nothing serious. He earned a Bronze Star on Tinian for actions during a night defense, pulled 2 wounded Marines out of a kill zone while under fire. Neither medal mentioned rifles or modifications. By late 1944, the Marine Corps had largely transitioned to the M1 Garand, a semi-automatic rifle less prone to the humidity issues that plagued the Springfield. The modified bolt technique became less relevant. But Marines who'd carried Springfields in 1943 remembered. They taught the technique to new Marines assigned older weapons. The knowledge persisted in informal channels long after the official need had passed. The war ended. Danny mustered out at San Diego in November 1945, age 24, final rank, private first class. He received standard separation pay, a train ticket to Montana, a handshake from a lieutenant he'd never met. He returned to Butte. His father was dead. Heart attack in the mine, 1944. His mother was living with Danny's sister in Spokane. The house on Mercury Street was sold. Kozak's gun shop was closed. The old man had died in 1943. The building was now a shoe repair place. Danny got a job at the Anaconda Smelter, operating furnace controls. Hard work, good pay, union benefits. He married a woman named Catherine in 1947. She was a school teacher, taught 3rd grade, never asked much about the war. They had 2 daughters, bought a house on the west side, lived quietly. He didn't talk about the rifle modifications, didn't talk about the court-martial, didn't talk about the Marines he'd taught, the lives the technique might have saved, the men who'd died with jammed weapons before he'd acted. Once a year, he got a phone call from Jimmy Park, the lance corporal who'd been the first to learn the modification. Park had made it through the war, become a police officer in Sacramento, married, had kids. They'd talk for 10 minutes about weather, families, work, never about Guadalcanal, never about rifles. Danny Reeves died in March 1987, age 66, heart disease. He'd smoked 2 packs a day since the war, finally caught up with him. Catherine found him in the garage, slumped in a chair, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects. The obituary in the Montana Standard ran 4 paragraphs. 3rd paragraph mentioned his Marine service. Mr. Reeves served with distinction in the Pacific Theater during World War II, earning the Purple Heart and Bronze Star. No mention of Guadalcanal. No mention of rifle modifications. No mention of court-martial or the technique that had spread through the division. The knowledge survived in scattered places. A 1978 article in Leatherneck magazine, Field Modifications in the Pacific, briefly mentioned unnamed Marines on Guadalcanal who'd altered rifle mechanisms. A 1983 book on Marine Corps small arms history devoted 2 paragraphs to unauthorized but effective bolt modifications in tropical climates. Neither source named Danny Reeves. In 2003, a military historian named Dr. Sarah Chen was researching Marine Corps sniper tactics in the Solomon Islands. She found Major Carlisle's 1943 engineering report in the National Archives, cross-referenced it with battalion records, located witness statements from the court-martial. She tracked down Jimmy Park, then 83, still living in Sacramento. Park told her about Danny Reeves, about the night in the supply tent, about learning to file bolt surfaces and polish triggers, about 14 Marines modifying their rifles before the officers knew, about the court-martial and the minimal sentence. "Danny saved my life," Park said. "My rifle jammed on me twice in January. Would have been 3 times, except by February I had a modified bolt. It worked perfect. Never jammed again. How many other guys can say that?" How many other guys are alive? Because some private from Montana knew rifles better than the colonels did. Dr. Chen published her findings in 2005, a journal article titled Innovation Under Fire, Unauthorized Rifle Modifications on Guadalcanal, 1943. The article, named Danny Reeves, detailed the technique, cited the casualty reduction statistics. Conservative estimate, the modifications saved between 40 and 80 Marines' lives directly, possibly 200 plus, indirectly through tactical advantages and enemy psychological impact. Danny never knew. He died 18 years before Dr. Chen's research was published. He died thinking his service was unremarkable, his contribution forgotten, his court-martial, the defining moment of his Marine Corps career. He was wrong. That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through engineering committees and peacetime laboratories, not through procurement boards weighing cost analyses, not through official channels moving at bureaucratic speed, through sergeants and privates and lance corporals who see the problem every day, who understand mechanisms from civilian skills the military never asked about, who make choices between regulations and survival. Through men who risk court-martial because watching friends die with jammed rifles becomes unbearable. Through knowledge that spreads person to person in whispered conversations because official channels move too slowly, and Marines are dying right now. Danny Reeves could have followed orders, could have used the rifle as issued, accepted the malfunction rate, blamed the factory and the humidity and the war. Nobody would have faulted him. The court-martial would never have happened. His personnel file would have been clean. But Tommy Breslin would still be dead with a jammed rifle in his hands. And so would 40 to 80 other Marines, whose names nobody recorded, whose deaths would have been attributed to enemy action rather than mechanical failure, whose families would have gotten telegrams saying their sons died fighting when they actually died, fighting a bolt that wouldn't cycle. The choice Danny made in that supply tent at 11:00 p.m. on February 3rd, 1943, wasn't really a choice at all. The moment he understood what was killing Marines, understood it in his hands and his training and his Montana gunsmith knowledge, he couldn't unknow it, couldn't unsee it, couldn't accept it. So he acted, accepted the risk, took the court-martial, taught others, saved lives, died in a garage in Montana with nobody knowing what he'd done, except the men who'd carried modified rifles and lived to go home. That's the real story the official histories miss. Not the battles and the strategies and the general's decisions. The private from Butte who filed bolt surfaces at midnight because regulations were killing his friends, and 14 other Marines who decided he was right. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.